Good morning, everyone. It's 11 a.m. and the fourth Friday of the month. It must be time for the Digital Learning Webinar. Hi, this is Jim Ptaszynski, the Vice President for Digital Learning, and I'm so very glad that you've decided to join us. So I'd like to start with a few brief announcements before we begin with the three presentations we have assembled for you today. So one of the things I think we should use this webinar to do is recognize the institutional as well as individual accomplishments of our digital learning community members. As most of you know, Dr. Ben Powell, Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship at Appalachian State. Ben is also a System Office Faculty Fellow, and you may remember that he presented to us in the last webinar about his system-wide licensing work. Well, today, we're pleased to congratulate Ben on being named the Vice Provost for Online Learning at Appalachian State University. Ben, we look forward to your continued collaboration, especially your insights from your new vantage point around digital learning. Now next, in case you or some of your colleagues missed last month's inaugural DLI webinar, the recording is available on the DLI website found at dli.northcarolina.edu. We'll also be putting today's webinar on that same site in a few days. Also on the site, you'll find information concerning the March Digital Learning Symposium. Through the DLI website, you can access information about the symposium, including the program tracks the planning committee have created. Starting on November 5, the online submission tool for session proposals will go live. I encourage you to submit a proposal early in order to increase the opportunity to showcase your or your university's digital learning innovations, as well as to be a contender for the very prestigious Digital Learning Innovation Awards. Also on November 5, the registration tool will open. Be sure to register early to take advantage of the early registration discounts, as well as to ensure your place at the symposium. We are capping registration this year at 250 people and expect the symposium to reach capacity again this year. So a final announcement is that the DLI website also lists the program for future webinars. Upcoming in November, 2 of our faculty fellows will be featured. Dr. Ellen Pearson of UNC Asheville will discuss her project on faculty development, and Dr. Kate Saul of NC State University will discuss her project around the intersection of technology and pedagogy. As always, please feel free to reach out to me or to John Falchi if you have any suggestions on webinar presentations or if you yourself would like to do one. But today we are pleased to have 3 outstanding presentations. We're going to start with Dr. Karen Vignare. Karen is the Executive Director of the Personalized Learning Consortium at the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, or APLU. While many of us have heard about or even experimented with adaptive learning technologies, sometimes called adaptive courseware, there are very few examples of where their use is widespread or at scale. So in today's presentation, Karen will be discussing some of the elements that universities need to consider in order to achieve such outcomes. Second up is Dr. Maria Andersen, Chief Executive Officer of Coursetune. We all know how complex course design and curriculum are, especially when this involves the alignment of learning objectives at the institutional, academic program, or course levels. In her presentation, Karen will demonstrate how technology, specifically Coursetune, can be used to support instructional design using such features as curriculum visualization and mapping. Finally, our own John Falchi, Director of Special Projects, will discuss Quality Matters. As you may be aware, Quality Matters is used at each and every one of our institutions, but its adoption is uneven. Not everyone has a comprehensive understanding of what Quality Matters is and what benefits it offers to our institutions. John will try to remedy that situation today as he leads our effort to support the universities in their growing adoption of QM. And now with that, I'd like to turn it over, the webinar, to Dr. Karen Vignare of APLU to talk about adaptive learning. Good morning, Karen.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks for the great work that you guys are doing down at the UNC system. The road to student success is a varied one, but we all want to see the results moving in the direction of serving our underserved learners. So I'm really happy to share with you today some of the results that we've been seeing in our program. And as Jim mentioned it, a lot of folks have not yet been doing anything at scale. We were lucky enough to receive a very large grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which was targeted directly at scaling adaptive courseware in foundational, gateway, first year types of courses. This work is continuing under the Every Learner Everywhere network that was started in actually late 2017 as a network, but grant funds were given to it in late 2018. And we have been busy this year working with, along with ATD, which is Achieving the Dream, a group of new institutions who have just started to scale their work as well. So let me share with you a little bit why we're doing this work. This graphic is pretty, it's pretty sad, because most of the time what we tend to want to think is that higher ed is the gateway to middle class and economic mobility, but yet as an industry, higher ed has not been affording those mobility to our students who are in either the lowest or the second tier of socioeconomic status. And this has been happening a long time. So you can see the data here shoots through to all the way back to 1965. And we are just barely scratching the surface on what we can actually do to make this better. So first, why are we focused on these early courses? Well, if you're thinking about graduation, you know the first entry into the academic experience is really around those first courses. And our low income and minority students are often lost in those first courses. They don't even get through the first year. Our faculty teaching those intro courses are often instructor track faculty, graduate assistants, teaching assistants with very little pedagogy training. And typically, we're not using our senior faculty with that. Those departments have been teaching these service courses, and the service courses are not properly incentivized as a student success vehicle. And that's about culture change, not just about budgeting, right? So cultures really reward in institutions innovation. We're starting to see some rewarding of innovation, and I just heard you had great faculty fellows, innovation around teaching, but generally we still reward innovation of research. And our institutional cultures really have valued academic freedom over faculty collaboration. So I think it's important that we start thinking about this as a system-wide process. So what is adaptive learning? Adaptive learning says, essentially, our students are coming in at varied levels. I often get pushed back and say, well, why can't we fix the K-12 system? Well, we should be working with the K-12 system, but we can't wait for it to be fixed, right? So one of the things that we have to recognize is with this academic variability, we need tools that help all faculty reduce that section variability and to leverage data that comes from these tools in order to improve what they do in the classroom. So the digital instruction tool provides a personalized learning experience and practice. We recognize while we have assigned homework for years and years and years, we're seeing less and less of the time being spent outside of the class in a productive way. And what we are beginning to see with these adaptive tools is that we are starting to get students to do the work in a very productive way. Faculty then can see the data, and they can see where students are having issues, right? So faculty use the data to develop a more personalized pedagogy in real time. And faculty are even more important in this world that we're in. So where are we nationally with adoption of these tools? Well, we're actually pretty low still, about 30%. So we still have a lot of work to do in making it aware. But what we can tell you is once faculty adopt the tools, they continue to use them by and large. And that's really good. Because what it tells us is that most of those faculty do not feel like, oh, you're giving me yet another tool that is not really effective. So we're pretty pleased with the fact that faculty are fairly satisfied. The tools are not perfect. So the grants I told you about, and I know all these slides will come to you, so I'm not covering everything on the slides, really demanded that these institutions listed here on the bottom agree to scale to 15% of their general education enrollments. And I'm happy to say we have until June 2020. Cumulative, we've already reached the number. And the institutions, by and large, 7 of them have already reached their scaling impact. So we're starting to have really good evidence around things that work, what are good and effective practices. We have, at the end of this, I will share with you a website where you could download the implementation guide. We're also excited by the variety that we have. Yes, we have more enrollments in STEM, but what we have is a wide variety of humanities and social sciences that we are beginning to learn about how you put these in the classroom, how you help improve student success, particularly aimed at those low incomes, first generation, and students of color. Most faculty are using this as required homework or practice. What we find is that students recognize whether or not that practice is actually useful in the rest of the assessments in the class. So if faculty use the tools that help students in all of their tests, then students are actually doing the work and coming more prepared to class. What this pretty graph, no, it might not be pretty, what this busy graph tells you is that we have a lot of experience with a lot of different vendors, and our faculty are ready to share with you some of their successes. And as I mentioned earlier on, both from the Titan data and our own data, generally faculty are satisfied with their courseware. And that's also good news. I want to be very, very clear. These are early stage products and they do need improvements, but by and large, faculty are generally satisfied with what they can do with the courseware. And the other part of this is often a question as we consider student success. We know that we have to be thinking about how much does this cost for our students. There are platforms out there where you can use OER. There are, when you choose to work at scale, that is across all the sections in a course, we're finding that you can negotiate with vendors better. When you start using and thinking about this across your institution, those negotiations get even better with vendors. And by and large, our faculty are reporting when they know the price of the course, materials, that their prices have gone down. We are also seeing that reported by the institutions. So that's good news. So one of the things I know people are very interested in, and I want to make sure we give time for our next presenter. With 2 academic years of data, what do we know? We have math, biology, business, and physics are very strong performers, all showing positive but small effect sizes when you use courseware year over year. So we have no significant difference between adaptive and non-adaptive, and I want to be clear about that. What this data is telling us is if you continue to use courseware, what you find is that you can improve student success faster by using courseware year over year. So one, you're getting better at it. And two, the non-adaptive courses are not improving at the same rate, which is also pretty exciting. By the end of November, we will have another round of data and we can tell you whether or not this is continuing work. And then I just wanted to tell you about our friends across the here we go, one more, there we go, our institutions. So one of the things that's really exciting that we don't get to think about in student success, but is what this means for students. So what we know at ASU, at Oregon State, at NAU is that hundreds of students have passed courses that students like them in the past did not pass. This is amounting to significant savings for those students by not having to repeat those courses, and that's particularly important. We are seeing where Georgia State has a couple of faculty really interested in doing learning achievement. They're starting to recognize improved learning. We are only talking about student success, right? Learning is even a more important holy grail that we ought to go after. We have some great data that will be released soon about students and what they think of these things. So don't start from scratch. Use the implementation guide that was collectively and collaboratively created by these 8 universities and APLU. And we are happy to answer questions. My information is available on the next slide, but I think at this point I want to let our next colleague go, and I will release.
So before we get to Maria, well, let's take 1 or 2 questions, and we'll have the balance of questions at the end after Maria goes. But we did get one in the chat here that says to you, Karen, do students take high stakes assessments within the next gen courseware or take a traditional assessment that non-next gen courses take?
So there are instances of both, and it's a great question. Generally, these are low stakes assessments that are happening within the courseware, leading students, when a course is well designed, leading students to support their higher stakes. But some of our faculty are using, all the way up to ASU in their college math program, 40% of the course grade is through the practice that they're doing in the courseware. So it varies, but generally we think a good model is to use the courseware as low stakes that builds directly into your higher stakes assessments, and students can then see why you're using both sets of tools.
Excellent. So we did have a question. They wanted to see the website up again. And so it wasn't a poltergeist, but I moved the slide back. And
I know I gave up control.
Exactly. So all these slides, the video will be available probably Monday up on the digital learning website. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Maria Andersen, who again is the Chief Executive Officer of Coursetune. And we're very pleased to have Maria with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So I'm Maria Andersen. I'm the CEO of Coursetune. We're an educational technology provider that helps with curriculum design and curriculum management. So I want to start with a question, and I'm hoping you'll actually give me a little bit of help in the chat with this. How do you know that students are learning what they need to be successful after their degree? So how do you know that what you teach or what you put in your curriculum is what they actually need for their degree? If you could just jot down a few words in the chat and tell me how you answer this for your program, your courses, your department. I'm going to actually type in the chat so you can find it easily. So I'm just going to read some of the responses as folks type here. employer feedback, surveys, agency execs who hire the students tell us, develop courses around competencies and assessments, links to competencies, track using spreadsheets, bringing alumni back to campus, program surveys, recognize proficiency measures, connecting with industry to get feedback, authentic assessments that mirror the type of assessments they would do with students in K-12 classes. That must be the education department. Alumni data, okay, great. So one of the questions we come up with is, if you are working with alumni or industry, how do you actually bring that knowledge into the curriculum and make sure that it's actually coming to fruition in the curriculum? And there we go. For a lot of programs, what we see is, as somebody mentioned, all sorts of very complex spreadsheets that aim to try to track the data that is coming from industry and alumni and other sources, sometimes professional standards, and align that with what's happening in the curriculum. These spreadsheets can be really, really large. Some of you may have seen them. The worst one I've seen was 3,000 rows and 200 columns wide. Let's just say there was no way to get a real understanding of what was happening in that curriculum program, but it was clear that the school was trying to make a solid attempt at making sure they had good alignment. The other problem we have with this data is that it's not just in one spreadsheet. It's usually in dozens or hundreds of spreadsheets with multiple formats across courses and programs. And often there's a need for, when you change one cell of data in one spreadsheet, that it changes in multiple other spreadsheets, which is often not remembered when something gets changed. So the data becomes out of sync very, very quickly, and we start to see discrepancies and errors in the alignment, the content of curriculum, etc. So we looked at this problem at Coursetune and decided that we would come up with a better way to view curriculum. We also recognize that even within just one course, not your entire program, but even just within a single course, we experience what I like to call curriculum drift and curriculum bloat. Curriculum drift is when you keep adding things as the career you're preparing students for, or the subject area you're preparing students for grows, right? So as new technologies come into play, as new skills come into play, we need to keep adding stuff to the curriculum. So that's drift. Bloat is when we just keep adding pages to the book, so to speak. So if you take your existing, course textbook or digital text or next generation course, over time, people all over the country request extra things get added to that. And so as they do that, the content of that course just bloats, so to speak. So between the drift and the bloat, the courses get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so even within a single course, the alignment falls off very, very quickly, or just simply gets too big and unwieldy to actually deal with the curriculum that's there. So there's also two competing perspectives for curriculum. One is the perspective of the faculty member who delivers the learning experience and the assessment experience to students. That professor is used to having a nice, well-designed layout for how the course is delivered. When we look at the other perspective, which is the curriculum architecture, we look at things like the course learning objectives, the program outcomes we're hoping to achieve, the standards, and it tends to be the course objectives that actually scaffold up to all of the other things, not the chapters or the topics that we teach in classes. And so we actually need two competing perspectives on the curriculum design. So in Coursetune, we give you a very different view of your classes. What you're seeing right now is a course in Coursetune. We design these as circles. I'm not quite sure why this one has stopped playing, but you can see two organizations for a course. You can see an organization the way it would be taught, and an organization so that you can do the architecture from the course objectives. And so you can see in the lower left corner, we actually have two layers for every course. One that lets you organized by competencies, CLOs, SLOs, whatever you call those course level goals. And the other layer that lets you organize by modules, weeks, chapters, however you actually deliver the course. This helps us to get at that internal alignment of classes, eliminating curriculum drift and curriculum bloat. What you often find is that we bring in courses the way they're delivered, because that's what we tend to have the learning objectives organized around. And then you can take all those learning objectives, and they'll first be orphaned on the side of the course where you have course objectives or competencies, and you simply move them to the course objective or competency that you are, that the learning objective matches with. This helps tremendously for finding where you have extra content or where you don't have enough content to meet a course level goal that your course has. So we first nail down internal alignment of the courses before we start to work on the program and institutional and professional standards. We can also show you alignment within programs very easily. So now you're seeing a collection of 10 courses on the screen. And in the right-hand panel, you're seeing the outcomes that are being mapped to those. And right now it's showing you the report, right? So on the right-hand panel, you can see clicking through the various outcomes and seeing where those show up within the courses of the program. You can have as many collections of those as you want at the division level, the program level, the institution level, and we can generate reports at the click of a button that will show you what those alignments look like and how those alignments fit within the delivery of your courses. It's also easy to do alignment to professional standards. You can do it on the screen you saw previously, or we also have a screen that's a little bit more of a grid type format, but it's a smart grid. So when you connect a high level when you want to match, say, a topic or a competency to an entire standard, it knows to also select all the learning objectives that go with it. You can choose to do this type of selection by the organization the instructor is used to seeing, or by the organization that's more traditional to curriculum architecture. All the data stays in sync. You don't have to worry about 10 spreadsheets becoming out of sync and having discrepancies in them. We also have assessment reporting. So something I haven't showed in here, but we can show you in a longer demo one day, would be that you can also add all the learning activities and assessment activities to the course to show up as arcs on the outside of the course. And because of that, we know every learning objective, what outcomes it's tied to, what assessments it's tied to. And so you can, for example, generate an assessment report that says, I want to know for this outcome, analyze information that's on your screen. I want to know every course and every assessment within this program that actually looks at this particular outcome. And so we can give you the full list of where to go looking for data and artifacts that might give you a way to assess student outcomes for that. The last thing I'd like to mention here is that we've tried all sorts of innovative curriculum initiatives in education, and often we find that these fail. And I think they actually fail for one good reason, which is that when you approach faculty with an innovation for the curriculum, they already feel like their courses are too full. They have the drift, they have the bloat, they might have been very well designed when the program was initially built 5 or 10 years ago. But to try to imagine adding one more thing to curriculum that's already too full is just too hard. And so one of the things I think that has to happen first before we can truly get to innovation within curriculum is that we have to clear some of the bookshelves. We have to remove some of the content that no longer needs to be there, or get smarter about how we deliver it or the depth to which we deliver it. If we don't make that space in the curriculum first, it's unlikely that innovation even has room to take hold within that curriculum. So our software provides you a way to start getting control of this and start making sense of your curriculum, start seeing where you can make space, and we'd be happy to show you more about it.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Maria. Why don't we open it up now to questions? And Wade has asked, do we have a Coursetune system agreement? We do, not to my knowledge at this time. Just so you know, Ben Powell, as well as Don and Eric and others, work on system-wide agreements when the campuses tell us there's enough interest. We don't want to push onto the campuses and say, oh, you need to consider going with this provider, et cetera. But when a couple campuses say, hey, we're interested, then that's when the system office gets involved with the aforementioned people. So if there is interest in that, I think reaching out to Ben, Eric, or John would be a good thing.
I can see a couple other questions in the chat, so I'll address those. Sure. We do have LMS integrations. We currently integrate with Moodle and Canvas. We continue to work on more. And we do also have APIs for everything in Coursetune, and I think at this point about 80% of them are writable as well as readable, and we're working on getting the last few to be writable as well. So if you want to do something with the data that you develop within Coursetune, you can very easily exchange the data with your other systems through the APIs. And then we do have a partnership with Quality Matters, and we are looking at some things that may make Coursetune integrated within those rubrics. It clearly, especially once you add the activities views to the courses, it makes it much easier to understand the structure of courses and how to find things in the courses if you were a reviewer. And the design just turns out to be better if you have gone through the work. So, so we are working with Quality Matters. We will have a booth at the Quality Matters conference, which I think is next week. And then
Orlando.
Yeah, and then IMS, we do have the, what is it called?
LTI?
There's a standard for competencies and
CASE.
CASE, thank you. I was like, SALT? Nope, that's not right. CASE. Yeah, so we do have a way to download your data in a CASE format. So we did that maybe a year ago. So that is available as well.
Good. Okay, so why don't we hold on the rest of the questions right now for Maria or Karen, turn it over to John Falchi so he can talk about Quality Matters, and then we'll wrap up with an exciting lightning round of questions for Karen, John, and Maria.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Jim. So good morning, everyone, and most importantly, happy Friday. My goals for today are to provide a basic understanding of Quality Matters, the value it brings to enhancing online learning across the system, and how it can be leveraged at your university. As we are moving through these slides, please keep in mind that there is an active UNC system QM contract in place, and that contract provides access to all the tools, training opportunities, and QM research that we will touch on briefly today. Okay, so let's start off by taking a look at what online learning looks like across the system. At least let's take a snapshot in time from spring of 2019. And so today there are nearly 7,000 online courses across the UNC system. And at the end of the 2019 spring semester, nearly 35% of UNC system undergraduate students completed one or more course hours online, with the majority of these students completing between 3 and 8.5 credit hours in spring 2019. So, as a system office online presence continues to grow, along with student expectations for online education, how can UNC universities ensure the quality of online course design and development? Well, one resource that is being utilized across the system is the Quality Matters program. So what I'd like to do is talk about the QM imperative and bring us back into history a little bit, just to clearly articulate the goals and objectives of QM and how it addresses the needs from an institutional system perspective, but also places a faculty emphasis on the program in general. So in 2003, Maryland Online, a consortium of community colleges, was awarded a 50 grant from the U.S. Department of Education. The focus of this grant was to solve a common problem among institutions. And that was, how do we measure and guarantee the quality of an online course? Now, this question was especially important back in 2003 and still is today, as institutions were beginning to share available seats in their online courses with other institutions, similar to what we do with the UNC Online today. Now, these institutions needed a way to ensure quality, that courses would be of equal quality for their students, regardless of where the course originated. So now remember, at this time, back in 2003, the majority of institutions in the US were beginning to dip their toes into online while trying to address the overwhelming faculty concerns of online being inferior to classroom education. So the FIPSE grant enabled Maryland Online to establish the QM program that subsequently branched off into the nonprofit QM organization of today with over 60,000 members. Okay, so what does QM look like? Well, today I'm going to focus on three key components of the program. It's a lot more complex than that, but I'd like to focus on these three for today. And then as we as a community continue the conversation, we can start to get into specific areas and so forth and hold additional webinar segments to address those specifics. Okay, so the first component I'll focus on today is that of a rubric that was created or based on research and literature for online course design, including instructional strategies, standards, to certify course quality. Now, as you can see to the right of the slide, there are 8 standards creating the framework for the rubric. These standards are further defined by 42 specific review standards, which are used during online course peer reviews led by faculty. So I want to make one thing very clear at this stage of the discussion. The QM rubric and the peer review process apply specifically to online course design and development. Quality of course delivery is not included in the QM process or rubric, although QM does provide training in online course delivery. And I'll make another aside comment here that Ellen Pearson, one of the faculty fellows here at the UNC System Office, is also working on a faculty development program that would complement the QM specific program for design and development of quality courses, but she's also focusing on developing a faculty development program for the delivery of online courses. And so taking a quick look at the general QM standards, typically much emphasis in online course design and development is in the area of instructional materials, but you can see that the QM standards range everything from course overview and introduction down to accessibility and usability. And that's very important because many of our faculty members and staff simply and rightfully so do not have the skills in all the skills in these 8 areas, and QM provides a nice guide to developing your course to address these standards. So the next component I'd like to talk about is the fact that, out of the box, QM provides for a system-wide repeatable framework for certifying online course quality. And again, it is administered by faculty to ensure online course quality. Now, this allows institutions to focus limited resources on immediate adoption and training for QM versus having to create their own framework. So ultimately, QM provides an efficient and reliable approach to scaling a proven online course design and quality assurance program. I should also offer here that most faculty, once they are introduced to the QM rubric and process, well, they get very comfortable with it and excited, and they begin to apply this approach to the hybrid and classroom-based courses. And that's very well captured in the literature, as well as some of the discussions within our QM committee that I'll talk about in a little bit. So lastly, related to this replicable team-based faculty review process, the fact that the QM rubric and training is based on national standards of best practice research findings, and instructional design principles, assures both instructional designers and faculty of its relevance and applicability. And so I mentioned team-based instructional, that QM is a team-based instructional design process in my last slide. I just wanted to highlight that this recent Chloe report, which is the changing landscape of online education, recently, or the most recent report, where they surveyed chief online officers, about 270 or so. These chief online officers that were surveyed reported that team-based instructional design leads to a more well-rounded online student experience, greater enrollment scale, and students performing comparably to or better than on-ground students versus those who did not take this approach. So this report also found that team-based ID led to more well-rounded and multifaceted online courses, which are more likely to result in enhanced student experience. And further, chief online officers reported that an institutionalized approach to instructional design is the best way to ensure such benefits are widespread and scalable. And then the last key component of Quality Matters that I'd like to talk about a little bit is the infrastructure. And again, everything I'm about to discuss is out of the box, ready to go once we became Quality Matters members. And so what I'm displaying on the screen right here is a snapshot of the Quality Matters landing page. And here you can see it on the top bar here, the various modules associated with the QM infrastructure, including a classroom where institutions can deliver their own Quality Matters training related to, I don't know, applying the Quality Matters rubric or other types of training, but you can also jump into Quality Matters proper, the organizational training here as well. There's another module here where you can facilitate the course review management process, as well as where faculty or other individuals can do an initial course review based on what they've learned after they've completed the APPQMR training. And so the one thing I did want to point out here is that in most cases, all of the roles associated with online course review and certification, most of those roles are not available at each institution. So to facilitate these types of interinstitutional teams assignments and facilitation of course QM reviews, again, the QM organization does provide a web-based tool to facilitate all of this right out of the box. All right, so we have an out-of-the-box solution for online course design and development, but you know, what's the impact? What are we seeing out there? How are our students doing? So it's really important, at least from my perspective, to understand that recent research conducted by North Carolina Central University and UNCW, their research findings suggest a correlation between QM training and enhanced student outcomes and satisfaction. Again, getting back to the imperative of Quality Matters, right? And this is consistent with national research. And if you're interested in getting at any of this research, again, all institutions, faculty, and staff at all of our institutions have access to QM. You can find QM research library online, QM related research. And then, of course, if you have questions about the North Carolina Central University and UNCW research, feel free to reach out to Sherry Conklin at UNCW, as well as Rachel Brooks at North Carolina Central University. And I apologize for not putting your email addresses here. So we've got an out-of-the-box solution. We're seeing a correlation with regards to using this program with increased student outcomes and student satisfaction. So just to summarize in the next slide, so what is the system interest? So in summary, the system's interest in QM, again, enhance the online course quality at scale, with immediate impact to student learning outcomes, right? And that's the key interest in applying the Quality Matters program, or is the immediate impact to student learning outcomes at scale. And there are other system-wide as well as consortial approaches that have already implemented QM for these reasons, including the California State University, the Ohio QM Consortium, and the Minnesota Online Quality Initiative. And the QM committee has reviewed the various models that these different offerings have put in place. And we're trying to develop the UNC system specific model for QM adoption and scale. So speaking of the QM Council, I just wanted to make you aware of the fantastic people who are guiding this. These are leaders throughout the UNC system that most of you are probably aware of, including our co-chairs, Rachel Brooks at NCCU, Enoch Park at UNCC, with additional functional representatives across the system and regional representatives as well. And this group is really focused on, or their initial focus is to focus on increasing training, Quality Matters training across the system. Here you can kind of take a look at the QM activity across the system, and particularly as expressed by 4 key steps towards course certification, right? So the blue bars represent the number of institutional faculty and staff who have completed applying the QM rubric, or as we affectionately call it, APPQMR. And APPQMR training is the first and a very important step. It is the prerequisite to peer reviewer certification, which is identified in the orange bar, or as the orange bar, and master reviewer certification, which is identified in the gray bar. And ultimately, the 4th step, online course certification, which is identified in the yellowish gold bar. But as you can see, most institutions are making great strides with APPQMR training, but for a lack of resources or funding, they cannot move towards scale. And that is why this is the top priority for the UNC System QM Council. So I just wanted to end with, while increasing the training across the system for QM is the prioritized goal and one that we'll be working on for the next year or so, I did want to lay out some of the more long-term goals and objectives and leave you with that. So again, as you can imagine, based on everything we've discussed here, we want to guide increased adoption across the system with an eye towards scale, help institutions establish a consistent level of online course program quality across the system, and establish a framework for participation across all institutions. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges that we're trying to address is increasing training. Other system-wide QM approaches have put in place what's called the bartering system. And this is where they leverage QM capabilities interinstitutionally to reduce costs and reduce time to implementation. And so we're looking at that. We're also looking at a regional rubric and peer review training and certification so that folks from various institutions can support an interinstitutional approach to online course design and certification.
We'll give you a couple minutes back of your time. Again, the next webinar, we've had to change it up a little bit with Thanksgiving and the rest of the holidays. We may stay away from the 4th Friday of the month because people will have too much turkey to stay awake, I'm sure. So we're going to do it November 22nd. And as I mentioned, Dr. Ellen Pearson will be talking about faculty development, and Dr. Kate Saul, her project on technology and pedagogy integration. And we'll also have some other presentations that day as well. But I'd really encourage you to drop a line to John or I if you have suggestions for what you want to see, as well as if you want to present yourself. We will provide some opportunity for you to talk about your initiatives on your campus and some of the things you're doing. We'd love to highlight some of those things. And a last reminder, go out to the DLI website, dli.northcarolina.edu, and check out the registration page for the symposium. And again, that goes live on November the 5th. And with that, we'll say adieu, and we'll see you in November. Thanks again, Karen, John, Maria. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you all.